Hi and welcome back. In this video, we're going to go over the musical functions that are used to edit instrument parts and note data. So we're going to get started because there's quite a few. Now I want to review where to get to the musical functions. This wrench in the editor, in the music editor, has them all listed here with icons next to them. And these will operate on any selected events that you have in the editor. Now if you're operating in the arrangement view, you can right-click and find the musical functions in this menu at the bottom, and they're all listed right here. If you use them here, then they'll operate on all of the notes within that instrument part. Now, there is one other way to get to them, and that is to right-click on any note in the editor. So say I select a few notes, and then I right-click, and then all of these exact same things are right here. So let's go over them. There's quite a few, so we won't spend a lot of time on each one, but I want to give you an idea of what's here so you know what you have to work with when you're editing the note data and instrument parts. So first of all, the very first one is length. So if we have a situation where we need to modify the length of several parts, like say this hi-hat part on this drum line here, say we want to increase the length of all these to make them a little more visible. They might sound okay this way, but it might be easier to work with them if we could actually see a little bit more of that event. So I selected all those parts by marquee selecting around them with the arrow tool, and I'll choose the length tool, or the length dialog box, and here we can add to the length based on these musical functions, or we can multiply by a specific value, like we can make them all 2 times longer, for instance. You could either through the slider, or by just typing in 2 here, that would make them 2 times longer. Or we can set them all to a musical function so they're all the same, like 16th notes or 8th notes. So let's just give that a try. I set this to 8th notes, set all to 8th notes, click OK, and there you see that they're much bigger. I'm going to undo that because that doesn't look quite right. So we'll set the length again, and this time we'll just make them multiply by 2. And you can see that they get bigger. So that's a pretty useful tool in this situation. I think we'll go to 16th notes, set all to 16th notes. So it's very fast and easy. So let's move on to the next one, which is stretch. Now, stretch will change the timing of a selection. So if I just go in here and do Control A, and that would be for the PC, or Command A to select all the events, and I'll use this feature here to right-click on one of the events, and then do stretch. And it pulls up this dialog. Now I can double the tempo, half the tempo, or I can make changes that are kind of in between there, or actually all the way up to significant speed ups, 5 times the tempo. But anyway, we'll double the tempo, and you'll see that now all the events in that selected area are much faster. If I do it that here, I'll get the same effect. Now, I do want to point out there's another way to do this that I actually prefer rather than that will actually bring in the edge of the event to make the event match that tempo change. And that's using the time stretch tool. If I go to the edge and I hold down the Option key on the Mac or the Alt key on the PC, then I can just drag this in. That works exactly like it works with audio events. So it makes the event shorter, but it makes the data faster. That's my preferred way to do that, but there is a menu option for it as well. Now, transpose allows you to take things up and down in pitch, as you'd expect. There's a transpose parameter for the track that we went over earlier in the inspector. Actually, this is for the clip, or for the event, so you can transpose things up and down right here. So this works very similarly. Anything that I grab or anything that I select, then I can take up and down in pitch. So I'm again going to use the Command A for select all, and then we'll go into the transpose, and you'll see that on this menu here, I can go, there's some shortcuts here. I can go down an octave, I can go down 2 octaves, I can go up an octave, or I can go up 2 octaves, and this will zero this back out, or we can set the slider. And you can see that we can go from -32 all the way up to 36 semitones in transposition. So I'm just going to go down an octave to see that's all what I can do. Just another option that you have is you could set all notes the same. Not sure exactly why you'd want to do that, but that is an option. But anyway, we're going to try it with -1 octave. And you see all the notes jumped down an octave over here. If I play that back, you can see that I've got a deeper left hand kind of a part now. You could also use this to change keys by going up by certain intervals. And let's look at the next thing that we've got for the musical functions, and that is quantize. Quantize's key shortcut is Q. As you see, as I hover over that, it shows me that Q. That means I can also access quantize from Q. The way quantize works is it's based on the current setting that you have over here. So if I've got this set to, I'm just going to set that to quarter notes and draw around this group of events here, and I'm going to hit Q. And you'll see that just aligns the starts. So it aligns the event start to the quantized grid. And that's how it works. If I undo that, then you'll see that that comes back like that. Now there's also a quantize 50%. The quantize 50% will quantize, but it won't actually make it perfect. It will bring it towards the quantized grid, but not all the way there. So let me just do that while we're zoomed up. You can see that brings it in halfway there, half the distance there, and that is a way to put some quantize on there to tighten things up without taking all the feel out of it. Also, quantize end, this is quantizing the back end. So if you've got kind of straggly notes like this at the end and you want to tighten that up, now we can quantize the end, and you'll see that snaps the end of those notes to the grid. Now quantize humanize actually imparts a little bit of randomness to both the timing and to the velocity. So if we take, like, a good example might be something like this hi-hat part. So if I zoom in on some of this here, I'm going to I'll just select this whole hi-hat part. And now I'll do quantize, humanize, and you'll see that all that stuff moved around a little bit. Got a little bit more variation in the timing. We got a little bit more variation in the velocity, which theoretically will give you something that sounds less mechanical. Well, that would depend on also kind of what sound you're playing along with it. But that's how that works. Now there's another humanize quantize, which is humanize less. And that does the same thing. It just doesn't have quite a strong an effect on that humanizing. It's the more subtle effect. Now restore timing will take you right back to where you were before you started messing around with quantize. So another useful feature is to delete double notes. So this will happen a lot of times if you're overdubbing to create a drum part. You might wind up with like the kicks or the snares in there twice and kind of a flamming effect. If you select all the parts and choose delete double notes, it will take those out. Likewise, delete short notes. If you're doing direct editing of this data, maybe with the pencil tool, it's not that hard to get in like some little notes like this that don't have much in the way of duration. And so if you select everything in the event and then use delete short notes, you'll see that those come out, but your actual real notes will stay in. Now, mute events is exactly the same as using the mute tool, and so is mute. See, all of these, mute events, unmute events, and toggle mute, all work just like the mute tool. So we can pretty much, we can either do this if we'd like by choosing musical part, mute or unmute or toggle mute. The best thing with toggle mute is using actually this Shift in M keyboard command. If you're already on an event and you do Shift M, then you can mute it without selecting the tool. Most of the time you can just use the mute tool, which you can also use here if you want to mute certain events. So I'm going to undo that, select the arrow tool so not everything's selected, choose the mute tool, and now I can mute some of these events. So that actually concludes all of the musical functions. and it gives you a nice set of things to work with your musical information. And this is also extremely useful for if you're editing instrument parts and note data. And like I said before, in other systems this would be called MIDI data, but technically it's not MIDI. The input might be MIDI from your controller, but technically it's not modeled as MIDI in Studio One because it's designed more with a future view in mind. However, if you're working with this and you're coming from another program, it's pretty much the same thing as editing MIDI data. All of the parameters are very, very much the same. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.